Have you ever wondered what series of events led to the most devastating global conflict in history, World War II? Let's take a step back to 1933, a pivotal year in history. A man named Adolf Hitler, with his fiery speeches and promises of a better future, rises to power in Germany. Fast forward 5 years to 1938, and we see world leaders signing the Munich Agreement, a pact that was meant to prevent war, but ironically, only fueled the fire. Hitler, emboldened by this agreement, sets his sights on Poland. A year later in 1939 he makes his move. German troops march into Poland, and despite the world's desperate attempts at diplomacy, war became inevitable. This marked the beginning of a conflict that would change the course of history forever. And so, with the invasion of Poland, World War II had officially begun. With the world at war, how did the conflict evolve and spread across the globe? Let's journey back to 1939. Europe is in turmoil. The Battle of Britain is raging. The British Royal Air Force is putting up a brave fight against the relentless German Luftwaffe. This is a critical moment in the war, marking the first major defeat of Hitler's military forces. In the East, the war takes a dramatic turn. In June of 1941, Hitler breaks the non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, launching Operation Barbarossa. This invasion marks the beginning of a brutal Eastern Front, a conflict that would consume more lives and resources than any other during the war. As 1941 draws to a close, the war, which had been primarily a European conflict, becomes truly global. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December propels the United States into the war, marking the start of the Pacific War. Now let's skip ahead to 1942, Stalingrad, a name that would become synonymous with the turning of the tide. The German army, once thought invincible, is defeated by the Red Army in a battle that marks a significant shift in momentum. This bloody conflict, fought in the bitter Russian winter, becomes a symbol of Soviet resistance and the beginning of the end for Hitler's ambitions in the East. Simultaneously in the Pacific, the Battle of Midway sees the United States Navy decisively defeat an attacking fleet of the Imperial Japanese Navy. This naval battle becomes a pivotal moment in the Pacific War, marking the start of the end for Japanese expansion. By 1943, the Allies had gained significant victories, changing the course of the war on both fronts. The tide was turning, yet the conflict continued to rage, consuming nations and altering the course of history. By 1943, the Allies had gained significant victories, but the war was far from over. How did this global catastrophe finally come to an end? Let's delve into the final chapters of World War II, spanning the years 1944 to 1945. It was in June 1944 that the tide began to turn with the D-Day invasion. This massive assault marked the beginning of the end for the Axis powers. As the war raged on, another significant event was taking shape on the other side of the world. In August of 1945, 2 atomic bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These unprecedented attacks brought about the end of the war in the Pacific. Meanwhile, in Europe, the surrender of Germany in May marked the end of the war on the Western Front. Then in September, Japan also surrendered, marking the end of World War II. In 1945, after 6 years of brutal conflict, World War II finally came to an end. What were the consequences of this war that had engulfed the world? Let's take a moment to reflect on the aftermath of World War II. The world was in ruins, and nations were left picking up the pieces. A significant outcome was the establishment of the United Nations in 1945. The UN was a beacon of hope, a promise to the world that nations would unite to prevent such a horrific war from happening again. But the aftermath was not just about recovery and unity. It also marked the beginning of a new conflict, the Cold War. It was an ideological battle that pitted the democratic West against the communist East, a war of words and threats that went on for decades. The war had a lasting impact on the world and its people. It reshaped political landscapes, altered ideologies, and left deep scars that can still be seen today. World War II, a war that changed the world and its people forever.